Hi, everyone. Welcome to this workshop that we are organizing with Mixpanel, how to find your product market fit with data. I'm so happy to welcome you. Let me see, how many are we so far? Okay, we're about 56, amazing. I'm just gonna let some other people join and basically present you our two amazing speakers that will take care of you during this one beautiful hour, which will be Ian and Vlado. I'm just gonna welcome them here. Hey guys, say hi.
Bonjour.
How are you doing?
Good evening, everyone.
Very good.
Doing great.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Amazing. All right. So let's begin. Ian will start and then Vlado will take over. Let's do it. So, yep.
Perfect. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for having us. Here's the agenda. I'll go quickly over who Mixpanel is, and then Vlado will take over, talk about seeing and feeling product market fit, measuring product market fit, and then we'll both tag team how product analytics can help measure and see and feel product market fit. And then Vlado will end it with our summary and takeaways, and we'll have a Q&A at the end, but feel free to send questions within the chat for the event. We also have this challenge before we start. Make sure to open your free Mixpanel account. You'll need to do so to, one, follow me during the demonstration later as I jump into the product, and you'll be able to participate in a challenge at the end of this workshop where you can win a €150 Amazon voucher. So 5 fun questions that I actually designed in the demo project that we'll send over to you in the chat. And yeah, hopefully you guys find it fun, and I'll get started now. So Mixpanel, when in 2014, before the Series B fundraising, our 2 co-founders set up a presentation with 2 problem statements. And the first one is that most of the world wins by either guessing or using their gut. And they'll either be lucky or wrong, right? And the second problem is companies in mobile and web are using bullshit or vanity metrics like page views and installs. And it's really hard to be really sophisticated, right? And that's kind of where Mixpanel comes in, is we allow you to track user behavior on mobile and web across all platforms, tie that identity together to measure things like conversion, retention, engagement, so that you can make better decisions and not get lucky with how well your product is, and help you find better product market fit that way, right? And by doing so, we've been helping so many customers answer certain questions about the metrics I mentioned for almost 12 years, right? We were a pre-seed round in 2009, seed round in 2011, Series A 2012 by A16Z. And when we presented these problem statements, we had our Series B in 2014, where we raised $65 million at just under $900 million valuation. And since then, we've expanded to offices globally, right? To London, to Singapore, to Barcelona. And today, it's actually outdated. We might be at 30,000 now. 30,000 companies or customers driving innovation and product growth in Mixpanel. And you can see some of our large customer, VRBO, Betterment, DocuSign, and got the G2 leader in the spring 2021. So yeah, that's kind of the story of very quick story of Mixpanel's journey and present. But I'll now pass it on to Vlado, who can talk about product market fit and why it matters.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ian, for the introduction. And just a heads up, everyone, we like to make this session as much interactive as possible. So if you go on, feel free to post a 1-sentence intro of you and your startup or company in the chat, and tell us about your vertical and if you've already reached product market fit or not. And then throughout this presentation, ask questions, and we'll try to get to them in a timely manner. And also we'll do the same at the end of the presentation, so we can leave some time for Q&A. So with that, let's get started. So why does product market fit matter? So the way how we think of product market fit, and I actually had my own startup for 2 years that I was really excited about, and this was my expectation going in. I just thought about it's very simple. You start and then you find it. Unfortunately, it feels like this game of Mario, where you found out that the princess or your product market fit is another castle. And you might try like 5, 10 times, 20 times, or as long as you need to. Some of those startups never reach that. So if we look at the reality, it's actually very different. It's never a straight line. Usually it's like kind of like a convoluted line, and the companies that are lucky will reach that. And if we actually look at the top 10 reasons for startup failure, its number one issue is that people haven't found the market need, or they ran out of cash, which is basically the same thing. They didn't have enough time and money to reach product market fit. And also, if we look at the bottom of this list, we can see that there wasn't a good channel fit, there wasn't a good business model, or there was issues with marketing, or people just like didn't pay attention to customers. But basically, as we can see in this list, it's almost like 5 or 7 things in this thing. So if you can find product market fit, you're very likely to make yourself very successful and make your company into something bigger. So let's look at a couple of examples. Maybe you guys heard about Quibi. It was a startup in Los Angeles that actually raised $1.7 billion, but it had to shut down because they didn't find product market fit and people weren't excited about this. So product market fit is not about money. Another example is Anomo, which was a social network for introverts. And unsurprisingly, introverts didn't want to share the social network. So it lacked virality, and it lacked kind of like this persona, product market fit, and product channel fit. And then if we look at Juicero, again, raised a lot of money, 118 million, and solved a problem where basically they had this over-engineered kind of like an espresso for coffee, but like a similar tool for juices and getting you a daily dose of a fresh juice that you love. Unfortunately, their solution wasn't the right one, and they lacked product market fit because instead of this machine for $400 that had a Wi-Fi connection and could check if your packet is still like up to date or is stale, people could just like press these pouches and make their juices themselves. So that was kind of an issue. So yeah, if we take a step back, the challenge is there's only a small part of the market or your customers or latent need that you actually can see. And to get the product market fit, you need to go beyond. And what more often than not happens, you will jump to the next slide, is that you'll be searching for that. And you might be missing some of these clues, and some companies can miss this entirely. And therefore, you won't be able to reach your next round of funding, and you might have to kind of like stop your ventures. And that's the challenge for us as leaders in startups. We're just basically trying to throw darts at the target, blinded, because we don't know what are the customer problems, what are the user behaviors, what are going to be the new market trends, and we don't know what's the other competition. So basically, it's like very challenging environment. And to solve this, the way how you want to approach it is actually learn what you don't know that you don't know. It's basically like this unknown unknowns and turn them into known unknowns. And basically you need a sonar, which in this case is product analytics or some kind of data and information at scale that will help you actually gather this information and make the right decisions so you can navigate your ship through the rough waters and get to the product market fit. So if we go back to that drawing that I showed in the beginning, it's never a straight line, but if you want to make it to the end, you want to capture insights at each point of those times where you're going to actually jump into the right direction and you're going to get closer to your customers. And that's how you can reach product market fit. So yeah, how to do it before your funding run out. Probably a lot of you folks are familiar with Eric Rice. He's famous for his lean startup book. It's actually something that I loved myself reading. It's super useful. And what's really interesting about this, you basically try to create cycles where you build, you measure and learn, and you try to do that as much as possible so you can accelerate your learning rate. And hopefully with those changes, you can eventually get to your product market fit. And basically what we're going to be talking today are the second and third step of this build, measure, learn loop, where we're going to focus on measure and learn. So basically, those are the two things that will allow you, instead of your runner giving you just like 2-3 tries to actually find it, to do this more frequently. So let's talk about how can you spot a product market fit. So the good news, it's kind of an obvious, like once you see it, you know it, but basically conceptually what you want to do is you want to make sure you build something that people want. And this basically means you're choosing a problem that is a significant problem that people are really passionate about and they love to use another tool to solve this. Second thing is actually you want to make sure that people are willing to pay for this problem, and therefore they can pay you for that and they have enough money to pay for your solution. So you want to find, again, like a problem that's very important, and you want to make sure that this is something people are willing to pay for. And then comes the third part, which is basically you want to be able to find those sustainable. So once you start your marketing campaigns, once you start your channel strategies, all of this needs to be scalable. And basically where I'm going with that, if you choose the right problem, you're very likely to succeed. So basically finding the problem is roughly 50% of the success. And then you want to iterate on the solutions to make sure you get it right. So let's look at some of the qualitative criteria, how we know that we're seeing product market fit. So one of those things, actually, when you'll talk to people and just tell them about the problem you're solving and some of the solutions you're considering, you're gonna see a lot of excitement, like their pace of speaking, and they're gonna be speaking a bit faster, their pupils will dilate, they'll be excited. In some situations, if you have a founder who's like has experience with sales or basically has been doing networking and knows how to guide you through these discussions, they can actually collect a paycheck and they can collect a payment for your solution upfront. Because usually in the SaaS business, some of these like sales cycles can take 3 months to 12 months. And those companies are willing to pay money for POCs to test out these features. And you can actually collect money even before you have a full prototype. And then once you have the product out there, you're going to see people are sticking around. They'll actually tell you they would be disappointed if it goes away. You're going to see a lot of exponential organic growth. And down the road, you're actually going to see your channels are going to become more effective, and you're going to be making more money, and people are just going to talk about you on Twitter and so on. But the key thing is all this is qualitative, and all of this could be perception bias and so on. So how can you measure it quantitatively so you can actually know if you have product market fit or not? Yeah, so let's jump to the next slide. So basically there are two approaches that you can choose from. One of them is the product market fit survey popularized by Sean Ellis. And that has a very simple question of like, how would you feel if you can no longer use your product? And there's a really good article that's linked to this slide, and we can potentially share some of these links, that actually goes through journey of the Superhuman app and how they use this measurement to actually see if they reach product market fit. And here's an example from that blog post. When they started, only about 33% of users said they would feel disappointed if Superhuman went away. And then they look at the feedback. They look at what people loved about the feature and what are those friction points they didn't like, and start to iterate those and basically make lists of hypotheses, test those out, build like new features into that until they cross the benchmark of 40%, where you actually can talk about product market fit. And once they go to 56, 58%, they started to see a really strong pull from the market, and people were talking to their friends and recommending the product, and were also like willing to pay. So this is one of the approaches, definitely like something I would recommend. The second approach is actually NPS score survey. So for those who are not familiar, NPS or Net Promoter Score is another type of survey that asks a simple question: how likely would you be to recommend this to your family and friends? And basically what it's asking about, it's like, is it good enough that you would use your social capital to actually suggest this feature to your family and friends? And again, what happens is if you get about 8, 9, or 10 on this like 1 to 10 scale, then people are very likely to recommend it to their family and friends. And then you can speak about product market fit. And this will give you kind of like the overall score of like the net promoters, so the ones who are like 8, 9, or 10, and the ones who are detractors, which are below 6. And if you minus those two groups, like once you get about 50 or 70 points, again, you can talk about product market fit, and you can also talk about virality, which is a really neat feature of this metric. But a true way how to actually define product market fit and make this on consistent nature is actually to talk about retention. So basically, if you have product market fit, you're going to see that your customers are going to stick with your product once you build a prototype, and you're going to use it for long term. So if you're not familiar with the retention curve, the way how you can read it is basically 100% of users came in on day one, and then let's say within 5 days, if you have product market fit, you're going to, let's say, see about 50%, but then on 20 days, you're going to still see about 50% active. It's basically like flat, and people stick with your product. If you don't have product market fit, it's just going to go down, and people are not going to be returning. And this is probably the go-to metric that you're going to look at on your day-to-day basis, and even long-term once you reach product market fit, because the higher retention you have, the higher is the lifetime value, and the basically further you can go on your acquisition channel. And we're going to tell you more on how to find it. So let's jump into that. And by the way, as I mentioned, if there's any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll have to jump into that. So let's talk about retention, because we now know that retention equals product market fit. So basically, with your product or startup or service, would you want to focus on or habits that happen on daily, weekly, or monthly basis? Anything that's on a yearly basis is in this forgettable zone. Is very hard to do. There are exceptions to it, but it's very hard. So think of that as going to the gym. First 3-4 times are kind of hard, but then after second or third week, it's just like it's hard not to go to gym. And basically, users will build a habit about this action, and they will just keep coming back because like their bodies desire this action. So the key for you is to figure out, is there some kind of like habitual action around your product that you could potentially facilitate and support? And then if it's like on a daily basis, it's great. If it's weekly, it's still good. If it's monthly, it's okay. And if it's yearly, it's possible. For instance, Airbnb did a really good job with like a once or twice transactions a year, but you have to have a stellar experience, and it's like super, super hard mode. So if there's something you can do on daily or weekly basis, it's much, much better. So let's unpack retention. What does it mean for a user to be retained? First, they need to sign up. So they need to log in, register, or basically interact with your product. And then at some point of time, let's say that you have setup moments. So for instance, with Mixpanel, if you start to use Mixpanel, you need to first get in the data. Otherwise, there's no value in the charts because there's nothing to analyze. But usually a lot of SaaS businesses have some kind of like setup moment where you need to like set it up for success. So that's something that you need to consider. Next is the aha moment, which usually if you follow the user while they're interacting with your product or you're doing an interview, they're going to say, aha, or you're going to kind of like nod or just kind of get visibly excited. And that's the first moment when the user realizes this is a product that could address some of my pain points, some of my problems, which made me consider this product. And the more aha moments you have, the more users get visibly excited. And then multiple interactions with the aha moments and return usage to your product leads to habit moment, which means that the user becomes a habitual user. You have retention and you have product market fit. And basically, for you to be successful, it's very important to use all of these like cycles to learn what are those moments. What's the setup moment, aha moment, habit moment, engage moment. And usually, if you just want to focus on one, aha moment will deliver a lot of value because then you can start optimize funnels and user interactions so you can actually get in. So let's jump to more specific examples, like what are the habit and aha moments of companies. So for instance, here we're going to be looking at habit moments, but aha moments are very, very similar. So for instance, for Pinterest, it was actually like pinning like a first pin within 7 days. And then the habit moment is doing this every single week over the first month. For Slack, it's actually exchanging a couple of messages with colleagues on Slack. And then what they found out that they basically is a sweet spot. If a user does an action 4 times on unique days in a week, they become habitual users. So if they use it just once a week, they might forget. But if they do it on a recurring basis, they're very likely to stick. And it's definitely a product that people usually adopt and don't leave. Airbnb, as I mentioned, is a little bit of an exception, just because you don't go on vacation every single day of the year. But even with such a stellar experience, you can do a really good job. Also Zoom, it's basically if you do like a 1 call every week in the first month, you're going to have also good interaction. And for Zillow, it's actually, even though the purpose of the platform is to purchase a home, which actually happens maybe once or twice in life, what they really found out is that people throughout this process, which could take months or years, they will try to compare different properties. And actually the happy moment couldn't be the purchase of the house, but it's actual interaction with their platform and using this Zestimate a couple times in the first 12-week period. So let's jump to an example that's closer to my heart, and I can talk about the Mixpanel here. So basically for us, what we found out that if you go to Mixpanel, and what's the value of a platform like this, actually discovering learnings and insights. It's when people interact with the data and then find out what's their retention driving moment, or like what's their aha moment, or how do they measure product market fit. That's when they realize a lot of value out of Mixpanel. And that's something that we kind of define as our focus metric. We wanted the people to focus on reaching these points. And we build a funnel to maximize the likelihood of each users getting in. So this is for the second user who's already going into an established project, but first they need to log in. If they fail to log in, they can't use our product. Next, what we found, there's actually a lot of friction in doing data analysis on your own. But if you're part of a team, a lot of times people can just consume others' dashboards and reports. So we found out if we nudge these people to like other dashboards, they can actually learn how their colleagues are interacting with data, how they're learning, and they can click into it. They can click on a core report and then start to play with it and share it with their colleagues. And what we found out, if we jump to the next slide, it's for every single step of this funnel, and you can see the baseline for us was roughly about 35–40%. But for every single step of this funnel, so if they actually got in and they saw something, if they went to dashboard, they reached this aha moment, value moment, or copied URL, their retention curve goes up. And basically, this is the goal of product market fit. You want to bend the retention curve and move it upwards. And the more users we got to the top, the higher was the activation retention. And what we saw, there was a tremendous, almost like a 3x impact on retention and user satisfaction when we were able to nudge the users the right way. And there's a key thing here, what I want to like leave you with before jumping to demo. This is a scientific process. This is something that's repeatable. So if you find yourself struggling at times, that's perfectly fine. And the good news is if you do things right, and you do it in a kind of like this fast, repetitive process, you can discover your product market fit, and you can bend your retention curve, and you can actually get people excited about your product. You can get high net promoter score, you can get people ready to be purchasing your product, and all of that is possible. And we're going to show you now with Ian in a demo how to achieve that and how you can do that for your startup or company. So Ian, back to you.
I am changing the screen here. Anyone who has been in Mixpanel before, type in like a me or an emoji inside the chat so I can see if anyone actually already has experience. If there's no one, that's great. Then hopefully this all looks new. I see Vlado. There you go. I knew I'd have someone here who's used it. But cool. So jumping in, I have, it's nice to learn about the product market fit that Mixpanel was finding that Vlado was walking through, right? Now, let's flip the industry here. And here I have a fake movie streaming application trying to steal a little bit of the market share called Chillflix. And it's got a niche kind of video or movie selection where we have a bunch of early 2000s movies, right? And here, we're trying and kind of finding product market fit with that. And I have this nice little dashboard where I can see the total signups in the last few months. I can see the signups by source. You can see most are coming in organically, probably via word of mouth. Others come from Facebook and next Instagram. The most popular genres, mostly comedy by a lot, by 3x. We'll kind of unpack that a little bit later. And then romance and drama coming in a little bit later as well. And then activation funnel, right? Kind of that setup moment that Vlado walked through. We're seeing the first time login, and then users come in and watch a video. So we have a nice conversion funnel there. I mean, we'd want a higher number of users who log in for the first time to actually watch a movie, but that can be explored later. But when I'm looking at this dashboard a little at a higher level, there's a little bit of grim, sad thing here. And Vlado mentioned flattening the retention curve, and what we see in this weekly retention report in the last 12 months is it's just continuously going down. We want kind of at least an almost smiley curve, but here we're not getting that second half of the smile. So if I jump into that retention report, the way we're measuring this is we're cohortizing the users who signed up and then measuring retention based off of watching a movie. And I'm looking at this weekly over the last 12 months. And when I'm looking at this, I'm seeing the really, really low retention curve that you mentioned, or that we saw earlier, right? And what I'm trying to figure out is, I know that we released some features like sharing or saving a video that would that might possibly be a nice hypothesis of higher retaining users. So I have what is called a cohort breakdown here. When I select a cohort, I have users who shared or saved a movie. So when I click this, I'm breaking it down to show the curve, the retention curve of users who shared or saved a video versus those who are not in that cohort and never did it. And let me just hard refresh this. Let me just create this report. Do this. It's taking a little bit of time to load here. My internet's been a little spotty, but as you can see, here's that cohort of users who are sharing and saving, where there are here's a 9%, more than double the retention than those who are not. So maybe there's something with users who are sharing and saving, right? And we want to hone in on these cohorts of users because we could push more and more users into that cohort. Then we'll start to bring that retention curve higher up, right? And so what we can do then is use this cohort in other reports. And so maybe looking at a flows report, I'm looking at users who logged in for the first time ever, so we could see that cohort of users who did sharing and saving and see which maybe UTM source was the most popular, right? So I have the login, I'm viewing one step, the watch video, I'm breaking it down by that same cohort we're honing in on, and then we're expanding it by the UTM source. So if we look at organic, it makes up 36-63 ratio, which is kind of like, it's the most, but that's a fair ratio here. We look at Facebook, it's about the same, 37-62. And then if we look at Instagram, it's actually 40-60. So that's an incremental increase by that channel. So while this report showed that organic and Facebook had the most signups, it looks like Instagram had the highest ratio incrementally that led to more shares and savers, which ultimately are higher retained users. So moving back here, maybe we want to look at a different property. Maybe we want to see, are the genres that we're presenting or pushing towards our fan bases or our user base the right ones. So if I remove that breakdown, I can expand this by the genre. And here we have the ratio of users in the share savers to be 37-38% for comedy. Here for romance, about the same. And those two make up the highest, right? The highest number of users of genres that are being watched. But then if you look at drama, it's 40-59%, 40-60 split. And that's an incremental increase. While it's the third most popular genre, it's actually the highest ratio of users of first movies being watched after a user logs in of those who are sharing and saving and ultimately retaining higher. So just enlarging the screen here. And so maybe when you're going through that activation process, you're pushing more folks to watch dramatic movies, so that then ultimately, in the end, they become a sharer and saver and end up increasing this retention curve, bridging that gap so that more and more people are falling into this orange line or orange cohort. So yeah, I'll actually stop there. I think there are some questions. Let's see. I guess Vlado and I were looking at the wrong chat for questions. So cool. And Vlado, were there any questions here related to product that I can address now?
Yeah, there was a question that I saw there. My retention curve is flat, but at 7%. So is that product market fit? So basically, it depends. So what could happen? There are two things. One of them is that, as Ian was just showing, there are different cohorts to your users, and some of those users have already product market fit. And as we'll see in a little bit, those are the audience that you want to kind of focus on, and you want to double down on your product channel fit to make sure you get more of those users. Second thing is basically only a subset of your users might get to those aha moments or to those habit moments, and you want to understand what are those and see if you could potentially go from, like, let's say about 7% users to 40%, 50% users, and you might potentially bend that curve upward. So it's definitely something that's a good start. It's definitely the moment you kind of like get it like flat, it's a really good sign because you have people that are coming back. And what you want to do is move it upward so you can actually acquire more users and monetize this channel more. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks, Vlado.
Perfect.
Were there any other questions? But if there is a big takeaway to, from this, right? We saw in this dashboard a really sad retention report. The highest kind of vanity metrics here is, oh, we have more signups from Facebook and organic, so let's just keep pushing these channels, or let's keep pushing comedy and romance, right? But the more scientific way to approach this is when we focus on this cohort of users, what we found out is that these cohort of users have a higher ratio of watching drama movies, or have a higher ratio of coming from the Instagram channel. So then your investment can kind of go into that and alter your product for these specific learnings that you're, in that like crazy line chart to the top to find product market fit to improve your product and increase your retention. So yeah, that's going to be the primary question, our primary lesson here. But if there's anything else we want to go through here, I'm happy to jump into it if there are any questions. Cool. If there aren't any, or I guess I'm looking at the wrong spot for questions, but let me know if Vlado, if I'm missing any there. Cool. Jumping back. Okay, I see there's one question that came in. I'd assume that higher retaining users are more likely to share and not the other way around. How do you make sure there is actual causation? That is a fantastic question. That's kind of like that causal inference that can lead to, okay, well, since they are already using a feature that power users would use, then is there actually causation? And we actually have, and hopefully this can load quickly here, but we have an impact report that can kind of show you whether a specific feature leads to more either watched videos or something else. But it's mostly on an impacted event rather than a retained cohort. So in this case, we're looking at, let's see if the share save event impacted more watched videos. And we could just keep this date range. And we have a propensity modeling here, and I can get into a little bit more details. But essentially, here we're looking at the launch event, did that lead to more watch videos, which ultimately should be higher retention because we're measuring retention based off of that event. And here we split it up to pre-launch adopters, pre-launch non-adopters of the share save, and then post-launch adopters and post-launch non-adopters. And we calculate what is called an unobserved counterfactual of adopters, the UCA, which is what we expect the rate of adopters to be based off of the increase from the pre-launch to post-launch non-adopters. And it looks like the pre-launch and post-launch or adopters is actually below the UCA, which means the impact is actually a negative impact, as you can see here. So the launch of ShareSave contributed to a decreased change in the number of events per user on watched videos. So actually, this is, if you're answering that specific question that was asked here about actual causation, I don't think there is much going on here. And you can even view the causal impact to look at it even closer, where we break it out to different segments, to likely to adopt to most likely to adopt, and calculate that UCA and that ATE an impact to basically answer, did this have causation on an increase of weekly or of watch videos and ultimately higher retention. So hopefully that answers your question. The causal impact does actually take time because we are breaking it into several different segments. But as this is loading, I see there are other questions here. All this dashboard seems so technical. What is the easiest way to measure product market fit with data for non-tech people? Got it. Yeah. So this is a lot of technicalities going on here. But typically, I come from a services approach. I came from a solutions architect role, a Mixpanel, where I've done close to implementations for different kinds of customers. And when you are planning out your implementation, that's the main thing you have to do, is plan it out. A lot of people just start tracking everything. But in reality, what you need to do is build out a measurement framework to tell you what you need to track in order to know which metrics, in order to measure the metrics you ultimately laid out. So we have a focus metric framework, right? And the top of it is a focus metric, which essentially the whole startup should be looking at to increase. Maybe it's like, for this, it'd be weekly active watchers or video watchers, right? And then you'll have the reach, which is how many users were signed up the last 3 months. And then you have the activation, which is what's the conversion rate of users who watched a video within 7 days of signing up. And then you have the engagement. How many videos per week are these weekly active watchers watching? And then we have retention, which is like this weekly retention, which is a good measurement to look at. And then business-specific goals, right? So anything specific to your business. And once you lay out the metrics within that framework, you can then start to see which events and properties need to be tracked. And once you have those events and properties laid out in this nice document, you start to implement those. And the reports get pretty simple. So if I look at the total signups, right, I'm just looking at an event of signup completed. So looking at the unique account, and this is our reach metric I mentioned earlier, and I can adjust the timeline to maybe the last 6 months or the last 3 months and view it on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis and view it in a line chart, right? And apologies, my internet is slow here, but it's literally just 2 buttons, right? So if I'm looking at, if I want to do something extra, I look up the total signups by source, very similar formulation of the report, but I'm just adding a breakdown of UTM source. So it's a simple, in the UI and the query building is the same across all the reports except the impact report I showed you. But you select the events, you filter if you want a specific, like maybe we only want to look at Facebook acquired users, or you can add a breakdown to show everything here. So the dashboard could be intimidating, but we have lots of resources you can use for it. And you kind of want to plan everything out before you have the dashboards you need. Let's see. Were there any questions I missed here?
Yeah, I think one question that was posed a little bit earlier is what happens if you have a one-time use product? So there's an example of an online course. that so far it's just like non-repetitive nature. So what I would actually suggest to you is in the beginning of the talk, I talked about the Net Promoter Score. You should look up it's a former VP of Netflix, Gibson Biddle, who actually does a lot of talks online, and he's using a Net Promoter Score to measure the quality of his presentations. And what he found out is that basically this correlates really highly with the really good done talks. And as a result, the people who love his presentation will talk to other people. So even if you don't have a product that's yet repetitive nature, you can use metrics like this to kind of like measure the baseline. And then what the product analytics helps you, it's in those situations where you want to understand if you have it or you don't have a product market fit, how to dig deeper into that. But it's definitely something that's possible. You just have to figure out the right metric and the right questions that you're looking to ask. As Ian mentioned, that's something that can start simple, and eventually you can develop it to give you that level of detail as you need for your business. But it doesn't have to get complex at the start. You just need like a couple simple questions, couple simple metrics, and you can get started.
Vlado, there's a good question for you here that I'd want to hear from you. How do you distinguish between product market fit and retention? And obviously these topics can correlate, as we talked about, but can also be mutually exclusive. For example, product market fit exists, but churn happens because of low quality service or new competitors. So how can you make that distinguish?
I think that's a great question. Thank you so much, Ori, for asking that. So basically, think of product market fit as you're choosing the right problem to tackle, and basically people will just kind of like discover you and start using your service. And then they will kind of like be really inspired and will potentially pay for that service or like register on your website, do some kind of like action where they have to like put in their social capital or money to actually try using your service. And then retention means that they're going to do that on repetitive nature. But sometimes you could have examples where basically the user cannot retain again. It could be like, let's say, medical experience, like you have like medical service where people just do that once alive, or it could be some kind of like very expensive travel experience. But in that case, instead of retention, what you're going to see is there's a lot of word of mouth, there's a lot of sharing. So potentially you could look on the likelihood of the user of sharing that event and trying to understand that. And again, what you're going to find is as long as you find the right problem and you do good enough job of solving that, people will use your service in spite of not having perfect service, in spite of not having anything beyond MVP. It's just that it's such a pain point, and you do provide some kind of solution to that, which is potentially right now the best in the market, then they'll use that, and you'll have some kind of a baseline, and you can learn from that. But yeah, I'm very happy to chat on this and go more into details. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I think one last question I see here. So yeah, Daniel mentions that you struggle to get Mixpanel set up when you first tried, and how can you get some help? So first, we do have a lot of online resources, but if a second session to follow up, little session, mini session makes sense, maybe I'm happy to run through something like that. I'll speak with the family and see if that would be a possibility, because I love working with startups and helping them get up and running with the right implementation and the right metrics. So yeah, so first check resources online like a community or implementation hub, and then if not, I'm happy to run maybe a follow-up session to this specifically for setup. I know we have a webinar series that we have former implementation managers running. They go through the steps and processes of implementing Mixpanel, and if that hasn't happened yet, or if there's a recording, I can hopefully share that with you as well. Cool.
Okay, cool. And I'm just sharing some resources for those people who are in a situation where they're not yet ready to measure retention, so they can understand if they have product market fit. Cool. And maybe we can jump back to slides, and we'll leave some time at the end for more questions. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So before we jump back to the takeaways, the Mixpanel challenge. So we will send this to you in the chat and as a follow-up, but we're going to have a link to the Mixpanel project where you have to sign up for Mixpanel to gain access. And then we have questions on the next slide. send screenshots of the report for each one, mainly the query builder. The numbers could be different based off when you loaded it. So, but send it to partners@mixpanel.com with the subject line, the family challenge, and a €150 gift card for Amazon will be rewarded as a raffle. It's for a media streaming platform similar to what I just demoed, where users can watch and actually purchase videos as well. So here are the questions. We will send these as a follow-up. And yeah, hopefully you guys have fun with it, and this will hopefully improve your knowledge of Mixpanel. If you're a first timer, it's fun. There's a lot of resources you can look at for these different reports and insights, retention, funnels, etc. But yeah, Yaprok is sending the questions right now, and yeah, we'll keep going to the takeaways with Vlado.
Awesome. And where we want to leave you with this talk is basically, we don't have probably the time to go into details, but we just want to like open you up to this topic you might not know about yet. But the really interesting thing is that, and actually when I had my startup, I tried to raise VC funding, and I wasn't successful at the time because I didn't have a good product market fit. But what I found out that the VCs were very reluctant to talk to me, because basically they had some kind of like a filter on the startups that they wanted to fund. And the product market fit is actually one of those major filters. What you're going to find is the moment you're going to reach product market fit, the relationship between you and VC is going to change. You're going to be able to send them a simple email with some metrics just to kind of demonstrate it. And suddenly, in some situations, they can be actually competing for the chance to invest in your company. So there's a very famous quote by Mark Anderson from Anderson Horowitz: product market fit is the only thing that matters. It's kind of like the location in the real estate industry. Once you have it, you de-risk the investment for the VC, because as we shown in the beginning, it's like a lot of the things that could go wrong with the startup are usually linked to the product market fit. So if you can reach that, the investors are more likely to have a higher return on your investment, and therefore are super happy to talk to you, and therefore are super interested to invest in you. So jump to the next slide. Here's a link, and I'll post the source into this. But like once you start like fundraising, there's a really simple like a structure for a cold email that you can send out, where you basically just describe yourself, the stage of your company, introduce yourself, and then highlight the traction, momentum, and some kind of like validation points. And as long as you have some kind of like data such as retention, or basically net promoter score, the Sean Ellis survey, to substantiate your claim, you're going to be very likely to receiving an email back from the VCs. We're going to be interested to talk more to you. Maybe at that point of time, they might not be ready to invest, but they're definitely start to build a relationship with you, so they can be ready to follow on that. And now jumping into the summary, basically what we'll love to show you today is that PMF and product market fit is something that's possible to reach in a scientific and repeatable way. So if you don't reach it right at first, that's perfectly fine. It's actually, most of the companies take years to reach it and even improve it. And if you're in a stage where you have repetitive behavior, you can potentially measure it as a retention. And then you want to double down on your cycles on understanding what are the aha moments, what are the habit moments, to build a funnel and optimize that performance of that funnel, so the maximum number of users gets through that, which means the more users will realize the value of your platform, they start to use your product on a habitual basis, and therefore they're going to be there for a longer time, so they can actually tell more of their friends to start using that. And hopefully some of the tools and insights will be there to provide you guidance on the journey and make you more successful on that. Yeah, so with that, we can potentially jump to questions and slowly wrap up the talk.
Nice. We have some people providing answers in the chat.
Yeah, but I love the part of this. It's like through webinars like this, you can connect with other founders who are at similar stages as you are and share stories, ideas, and basically potentially some things that can work for you, which is just amazing. Because like we're all on this journey together, and the more each of us becomes successful, the more we can learn from each other.
Awesome. Last chance for a few more questions here. Marte, if you have a microphone on you, we could just give you the screen.
We can invite you on stage next time.
But all great points there.
Appreciate it. So it sounds like we've covered all the topics that were of interest to you, and hopefully we got to most, if not all, of your questions. And oh, there's one more question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Benjamin, let's see. Once you have a Mixpanel account, I'll actually show you where you can access the different industries. So up here, when you click the project, we have sample data sets that anyone with a Mixpanel account should be able to access. And there are B2B and SaaS. There is a B2B and SaaS industry data set. And when you go into any of these, there are sample dashboards in each one that we've seen that are pretty common, kind of like a how-to for certain reports. And hopefully you can find these helpful. The challenge is based off the media one here.
Yeah, and just to give you a couple of ideas as you're in the B2B stage. So a lot of times you can actually use qualitative interviews for these aha moments. And when you do demos of your software or your SaaS business, you can actually see and just like watch those sessions to see where users were super interested, they ask more questions. Usually those will correlate to aha moments and habit moments. And once you get users signed up, you can then track their usage, what is their highest engagement, what type of services on the platform they use more frequently. And they will kind of like guide you towards like the habit moment. And all of this is actually a lot of insights that you can then apply to your homepage, where you're collecting leads and where you're kind of getting people excited about your company. And you can just show examples of what you actually offer that resonate with your customers that are already in the platform. And it's very likely that your conversion rate of your website will go up and you'll see more leads. And again, it's also like information that can be used by your sales team. Awesome.
Ooh, there's a tough one here, Vlado. How would you disprove a claim saying that high churn means no PMF, whilst there just might be a service problem?
High churn. Okay, so basically we're saying that there's low retention, and we're assuming that this is due to the service problem. I see. And do we have any more information about the situations? Like, was there like customer complaints about the services, or did users like post on Twitter? So just a couple of ideas here, and I'm just like spitballing. There could be other things. So product market fit is just one of the kind of like fits you need to get. There's a product channel fit. There's like product persona fit. So basically, I would kind of like dig deeper into those questions. Maybe there's an issue with the channel of how users are getting in. There's bad expectations on the user side, which lead to like bad experience on the customer side, or potentially just have like the users, they don't have a significant problem. And this could be another thing to look into. But yeah, generally what you're gonna find, if you do a really good job at solving your problem for your customers, they won't be able to stop talking about your service. So you're gonna see a lot of organic growth. And if this is something that's used more than once, you're very likely to see people coming back, even though you just have an MVP solution. But that's potentially the best thing that's in the market right now. So the users don't have a really good workaround, and therefore, even with not so perfect solution, you might be the best thing for them. Awesome. Mucho gusto, Mate. Nice to meet you.
Hello, guys. Thank you for this amazing workshop. I'm checking if there's any last questions for you. But yeah, I don't see them. So, but the fact that we're finishing the session doesn't mean that you cannot keep asking your questions, everyone. Feel free to keep asking questions on the chat, and I will make sure that it gets into the right hands and you get answers to those questions. I just want to really thank you to Vlado and Ian. It was a really great workshop, and it was really my pleasure working with you, preparing it and hosting it with you. Thank you so much. Do you have any last words to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome. I didn't realize there was another chat that everyone was super engaged in. I just plugged in one more thing. We have a startup plan for a lot of companies like yourselves, where we give you $50,000 in free credits towards our growth or online plan. So I put the link in the chat, so be sure to check it out and see if you qualify.
Yes, and if you're coming from the family, and so if your startup is part of the family, you have this discount, and you can choose the family on the drop-out list in the partner section. Yes.
Yeah, and just to add to all what has been said here, I'm originally European, and I'm super excited about the startups in Europe and like a lot of the potentials that we can achieve. So yeah, I would just like leave you with Steve Jobs' comment, like stay foolish, stay hungry, and don't let other people tell you that your idea is bad or something. Just like keep following your customers, learn what they need, and you'll eventually get it. And we'll be there to guide you along this journey. We'll be cheering along the sidelines for you.
Amazing, amazing, amazing close-up. Thank you so much, guys. Hope to organize another event like this. Ian, I'm totally up for it. Let's talk about it for just the setup as well. And yeah, that's all, I guess. See you guys and see you, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Just please don't forget to fill the feedback form. I put it on the chat. And because we love to keep doing events like this and we want to get better, so please do fill the feedback form. And we will send you a follow-up email with everything regarding the partnership, the challenge. So yeah, make sure you have your eyes on your mailbox. And yeah, that's all I think. That's all. Have a lovely evening or morning or whatever, wherever you are. And hope to see you soon. Bye.
See you around.
Bye, everyone.
Girl,